Welcome back to part 4 of our study as we're looking at Genesis chapter 19, verses 36 through 38 today. This study has been called The Aftermath of Sin, and it's because what we're looking at is what happens after you sin. We see this in Lot's story here. As we've been looking at his story, this is the end of his story in the Bible. You don't hear anything else of what happens to him. It's unfortunate it ends this way. But there's also some encouragement here too. So there's a warning, there's an instruction, and we ought to be encouraged from the story too. So it's not all doom and gloom, it's not all evil, it's not all depravity, though there's a lot of that in it. And it's a short little story, just kind of a little nugget there for you. But there's some things we need to learn here. There's some lessons learned from the story. So at the end of the account of the birth of Lot's sons or grandsons or whatever, that's what we find here. At the end of the story, it's the account of the birth of these two boys. They're actually his sons and grandsons, which is really bizarre. But that's what happened. And it's kind of disgusting. But that's the history of it. That's the truth. So this seems to be... there seems to be a point that Moses, the author, remember Moses is the author of this, there's a point he's getting at here. There's a reason why he's included this story. It's not just for, just to kind of take a shot at Lot, though it is a derogatory story. It's not a good story, because I think it is a negative story. And it's pointing out the Moabites and the Ammonites, where they came about. The reason why the Moabites and the Ammonites exist is because of incest. These two nations are cousins to the Israelites, but they came into existence through sin, and that sin kind of set the trajectory of these nations. The way they were conceived really set them on the path to becoming evil nations, to following false gods, not the true God. So Moses and the people knew full well of the sinfulness of the Moabites and the Ammonites. In Numbers 25, we read that as the people were camped at Shittim, the daughters of Moab came to the Israelites and seduced them to make sacrifices to the Baal of Peor. So the women come in, they seduce the men to make sacrifices to this false god. That's what they do. And then 24,000 people died on that day because of that. That wasn't a great time in the nation of Israel. This would only be the beginning, though, of the trouble Israel had with Moab. As for the Ammonites, Moses did not have to contend with fighting with them. God actually prevented them from fighting against the Ammonites, and God had his own reasons. But Joshua would have to fight against them, and the judges, and Saul and David, but not Moses. But God wrote in the law against the God of the Ammonites. Did you know that? He wrote against the law, against Molech, who is the Ammonites' god. Lot's descendants followed a god that required child sacrifice. Very interesting, isn't it? That they came about because of incest, and then the god that they worship is one that sacrifices children in evil. So, very interesting. In the law of God, he told the Israelites that participating in the worship of Molech was a capital offense, punishable by stoning. And if the people failed to follow through with the punishment, then God himself would cut the person and the clan off from among the people. This is the heritage of Lot. This is the blessing of Lot, upon the world. Having these two tribes of people and having this legacy of just evil and false god worship. So it's sad. It's so sad, man. But this is the end of his story in the Bible. It's the people of Ammon and Lot. But it's not the end of it all, right? Not all is lost here. That's good news for Lot. It's good news for Lot's descendants. Lot's descendants would descend into pagan idolatry, child sacrifice, but yet with God there is still hope. There's always hope. In Matthew 1:5 we read that in this amazing statement, and Boaz, the father of Obed, by Ruth. That's all it says, but if you know who these people are, you know why it's such an amazing statement. By itself, it doesn't seem like it's a big deal. But if you combine that with the story of Lot and the story of Ruth, it becomes a story of redemption. Ruth was a Moabite, right? She was descendant from Moab, from Lot, who happened to marry an Israelite husband who was living in Moab, in the country of Moab. He shouldn't have been there, right? Shouldn't have been there. The Moabites were fighting against the Israelites, but they go and live in Moab. There's something going on with that. There's some speculation as to why they moved there, why Naomi and her husband and their 2 sons moved to Moab, and I don't know, it's kind of weird. But anyway, God directs that whole situation, obviously, and has Ruth be brought into that family, and then they die, and then they have to go back to Israel. And so Naomi takes Ruth back to Israel. So, and then that marriage put not only Ruth into the Israelites, into the Israelite line, right? Her first marriage. Then the second marriage with Boaz just cemented that. And she, along the way, as they're heading towards Israel, she converts to Judaism. Takes an oath that your God will be my God. And so she takes an oath, becomes a Jew, goes into the land of Israel, and then Boaz finds her, marries her. But that's an amazing thing, is that as we're going through that marriage with her and Ruth, a relative of Naomi's, now that puts her in the line of Christ. She becomes a child of the son of David, or she is one of her descendants is David. One of her descendants then is Abraham, or one of her ancestors is Abraham then. One of her ancestors is also Lot. It's crazy to think about. Her marriage to Boaz put one of her husbands and hers, through marriage, back into the line of Abraham. It's like you go back to Abraham because Boaz is in the line of Abraham. She's in the line of Lot. You got both sides of the family. He goes back to Haran, or not Haran, but to Terah. And it's amazing to see how God worked all that out to bring like Ruth into this. And she's a Moabitess. She's a descendant of Lot. Crazy. One that was like condemned, that fought against the Israelites all the time. And even in the time of Judges, when Ruth was married into the Israelite line, the Moabites and the Israelites were fighting. Moabites would come and raid the Israelite land and stuff. So it's amazing to think about that God brought the Moabites, and I'm sure the Ammonites, they're going to be around the throne of God in the end. One day, all those people will be around there. There'll at least be one person, if not many, in that line, and around the throne at the end of time. And Ruth will be there. People from Ben Ami will be there, and it's amazing story what God has done. So come back next time, and we'll finish up our study of this section.